This video is brought to you with the help of my lovely patrons. Just because she likes the same bizarro crap you do doesn't mean she's your soulmate, said Chloe Grace Moretz as Rachel Hansen, the protagonist's little sister in the 2009 film 500 Days of Summer. Or as screenwriter and director Celine Song put in her sophomore debut, the 2025 modern romance Materialists, just because someone checks all of your boxes doesn't mean that it's meant to be. We're talking about people, Lucy the matchmaker declares to one of her clients who says that she's not only a catch, but also only wants to date white guys. People are people are people are people. They come as they are, and all I can hope to find you is a man that can tolerate you for the next 50 years, who likes you at all, and you're not a catch because you're not a fish. When I was watching Materialists recently, I was surprised at all the similarities and overlaps with 500 Days of Summer, and not just with broader societal themes like men versus women, love under capitalism, expectations versus reality, and finding true love, but even in the more minute details. For example, the fact that both protagonists work in a love-related field, matchmaking and Valentine's Day card writing, how they both star nepo babies with blue eyes and bangs, how each protagonist has a penchant for blue dresses, though the modern update is more jewel-toned than hipster pastel, how both white couples end up at a black person's wedding, and how they each go to a party with those yellow outdoor ball lights. And I don't mean to point out these similarities as negative criticism against the newer film, but rather because of their similarities, we can use them as a way to gauge how this type of subversive romantic comedy or dramedy has evolved. And I say subversive rom-com instead of anti-rom-com because the screenwriters themselves of 500 Days of Summer have said on this subject that sometimes people have identified this as like an anti-romantic comedy because of the way the movie ends. But I'm not anti-romantic comedy, says Webb, one of the screenwriters. Romantic comedies can be incredibly subversive. I mean, Nora Ephron was identifying a modern situation and analyzing it, breaking it down and creating an uncynical understanding of how people behaved in a really beautiful way when she was doing When Harry Met Sally. What she was doing was incredibly progressive and really thoughtful. And many wouldn't call Materialists a straightforward rom-com either, despite the nostalgic marketing of the narrator in the trailer and the very stark posters that look like they could be for a late 2000s or early 2010s comedic romp. It's more of a drama with some absurdist and self-aware humor thrown in for levity. And let me just say this about the posters, they were so uncreative and so plain that honestly it turned me off to the movie altogether, which is bad because I actually ended up really liking the film once I put my poster bias away. I actually did my own poster that I thought was slightly more creative than just stills from the movie that conveyed zero thematic elements. Like comparing the poster from 500 Days of Summer to Materialists, which one looks more visually interesting to you? Also, this is my own hang-up, but the movie is called Materialists, but it sounds so much better as The Materialists, and I'll probably be switching between the two in this video. With all that said though, I was surprised at how low the reviews were for Song's latest feature. Not only because her debut garnered such critical acclaim, and I didn't like it, sorry, but because her second film Materialists had me crying at the end. Throughout the entire movie, I kept thinking, wow, what a good movie. It felt timeless. It felt like, as Harry Styles once said, like a real movie.
You know, my favorite thing about the movie is like it feels like a movie. It feels like a real
It reminded me of so many classic stories, as Song took inspiration from Jane Austen's work, and it reminded me of more modern stories, like 500 Days of Summer. The rewatch potential for me with Materialists is huge, just as it was with Mark Webb's directorial debut in 2009. But it just didn't strike a chord in a lot of people like Past Lives did, which again was a surprise to me. So in this video, I want to delve into that disconnect with Song's intent and execution, as well as, like I said before, the similarities and differences in how these two subversive rom-coms, or dramedies, handle the same themes, but at different points in history, as dating and how we see the world through capitalism and a more feminist lens has shaped the discourse around romance. So without further ado, let's go. So before we delve in headfirst into the analysis, let me give you a small rundown of each of the story's plots. 500 Days of Summer debuted in January of 2009 and was written and directed by men in their early 30s. It was directed by Mark Webb and written by Scott Neustadter and Michael H. Weber. It was also their debut feature film, believe it or not. The film is told from Tom Hansen's perspective, essentially a stand-in for the everyman/nice guy, and I mean that in the derogatory sense. He's stuck at a job he doesn't like, making cheesy greeting cards, when he studied to be an architect. One of his so-called friends calls Summer a bitch when they haven't even met her yet, and he doesn't say anything against it. A lot of his friends' misogyny he kind of just shrugs off like any nice guy would. And when his other friend, who's a little bit nicer, tells Tom to just go for it and ask her out, he can't even do that. He's a guy who thinks that he's owed a relationship, and the film explores that entitlement through his relationship and breakup with Summer, his cool girl realized, or so he thinks. In reality, Summer is a person. She has her own thoughts and feelings, but because Tom is so self-absorbed and projects all of his ideations onto her, that she's the one for him and that she just doesn't know it yet, it's the cause of their falling out. He's not emotionally mature enough yet to be in a relationship with anyone, and he initially blames Summer for all of this. It's not until they break up and he self-reflects that he realizes that he's the problem. He's internalized too much of the patriarchy to see women as people, not as objects of validation to prove you're a man. And this is all by design. The big discovery is that she's not a monster. Scott Neustadter, one of the screenwriters, said in 2009 to Cinema Blend, "We decided in the beginning we're going to tell you this story from his perspective. These are his memories. Obviously, it's warped by a guy who's watched too many movies and listened to the wrong songs and did not get The Graduate. Because he's telling the story, there are going to be gaps. He has no idea about some of these things. He doesn't have the answers." We as the audience can see that he not only doesn't listen to Summer, but he never even asks about her life unless it has to do with her sexual and romantic history. What does she want to do with her life? What are her dreams? What did she do in Michigan? He doesn't care, and thus we as the audience never find out. As Rachel, his little sister and kind of like wise man figure in the film, says to him, "Look, I know you think she was the one, but I don't. Now I think you're just remembering the good stuff. Next time you look back, and I really think you should look again." Michael Weber, the co-screenwriter, noted in 2009, "Also, it is Tom's memory and Tom's story. Whatever point in the future he's telling this and remembering this, the fact that she's not a villain, wherever Tom is, he's in a healthier place. Because he looks back on this experience and does not vilify her. If he was remembering her as a bad guy, what does that say about where Tom is and what he got out of that experience?" In the end, 500 Days of Summer is a letter to men to not vilify their ex-girlfriends, and to actually reflect and work on themselves. What a novel idea. To stop projecting onto women and wondering what they can do and be for you, and instead treat women like real human beings. Does this subversion work is another question. I think that on the whole, it's still one of my favorite movies, and there's a huge nostalgia factor in that because I saw the movie in high school, but I do wonder how well the message is conveyed that Tom is the problem and not Summer, especially when a lot of people thought Summer was a villain and a bitch, even though the blind date lays it all out there by basically calling Tom a fool because Summer explicitly told him she doesn't want a boyfriend, and yet he's still mad at her. And instead of sitting with that, Tom gets drunk. But I guess that's the point. When I was rewatching 500 Days of Summer for this video, I had a hard time figuring out who this was for, because the writers wanted men to get something out of it, to relate to it, but I think it was at least marketed more towards women simply because of the genre. Not to mention that even when we as women watch male-centered films, we are made to relate more to the men than the women. The white, straight, cis-het male worldview is default, and we as women are socialized to believe that as well. Hence, internalized misogyny against female characters in film and TV. That's why when the film first came out, more people had sympathy for Tom than for Summer. It wasn't until fourth wave feminism's reckoning with the movie that we were like, wait a second, Summer's not a bad guy. And so I don't know how well 500 Days of Summer works to undo toxic masculinity if it still led to a lot of the audience not getting it. On the other hand, is that the fault of the writers or the filmmakers? Or is it society? Let me know what you think down below. But I do wonder, why can't we know more about Summer? I know she's kept in the shadows because it's Tom's story and therefore he doesn't know about Summer because he doesn't care to, but it still bothers me because it led to such a mischaracterization of her for a really long time. And no offense to the writers, but they sort of treat her like collateral damage. Tom and Summer's relationship was all in service of Tom to grow as a person. Screw all of Summer's feelings. She even apologizes to him for getting angry that he punched a rude asshole for her, even though it made her uncomfortable. She apologizes.
I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry.
But at least she ends up married in the end, so all's well that ends well. On the other hand, she doesn't seem to be too bothered by their falling out, and she's even the one that ends it. But still, it makes me wonder. Subverting tropes doesn't always work, but I will say, I still love coming back to the movie every once in a while, but I do find Tom to be a lot more annoying now. And speaking of subverting tropes not working, enter 2025's Materialists, written and directed by Korean-American director Celine Song. Materialists is told from Lucy's point of view. Lucy, portrayed by Dakota Johnson, is a woman living in New York City in her mid-30s and works as a matchmaker. And I was honestly surprised at Johnson's superb acting. Normally she doesn't do anything for me, but I think she pulls this role off so well. I love that she still has wrinkles too and expression lines, and I think she just sold it for me. She looks like a real person. The character of Lucy is cynical about love due to her line of work, where finding the one is reduced to numbers, how much one makes, how old one is, and how tall one is, if you're a guy. Not to mention, she knows that though people are looking for love, they also enter into relationships to make their sisters jealous, to feel valued, to fill some dark, unspeakable void, and of course, as good business decisions. As Lucy notes, it's about who will bury you, who will be there when you need your diaper changed, and again, about feeling valued, feeling worth it. And she's great at her job, securing 9 marriages. But she herself, again, doesn't believe in love. She says that she'll either die alone or marry rich. But when the opportunity comes to marry rich, cue Pedro Pascal as Harry, a multimillionaire with a 12 million Tribeca penthouse, who also respects women, when he comes along and proposes, Lucy declines. Why? Because even though he's broke and still living with roommates in his 30s, John, Lucy's ex, is who she truly loves. And a lot of people hated this. And I get it, it doesn't make sense. You're turning down a millionaire. As a pragmatic woman with a traumatic history of being financially insecure, how does this make any sense? Song essentially tells us that Lucy marries for love, that in a perfect world without thinking of material things, John is who she loves and we should accept that. It's a tough sell, so I totally get if you don't buy in. And even worse still, it feels like Song's conclusion of the film is a moral judgment on the audience, or at least it's taken that way by viewers. Some people feel like she's saying women are vain because they care about money, even though she ironically points out how money is extremely important, especially to women who live in a world where they're at the mercy of rich, powerful men. Screw Materialists, We Want Labor by Paris Paloma. Kristen Godsey, in a review published by Jacobin, interprets the film as a take on courtship warped by capitalism and have-it-all feminism, writing, "The implicit message is clear. In a free market economy, women must either marry for money or earn enough of their own money so they can afford to marry for love." It's pretty bleak. Some people have even called Materialists broke boy propaganda. And though I like the ending and understand it, and I'll defend it later, I do want to sit with this disconnect and discontent because it's fair criticism. First off, and most obviously from a financial perspective, Lucy's choice makes zero sense. It's explained in the film early on that Lucy has trauma from her parents' divorce being about finances, and even has a public fight with her ex John about not being able to enjoy their anniversary because they don't have enough money to enjoy themselves and live without worry. That's why she wants someone who can financially support her. Why go back to someone who is yelling at you on your anniversary about how hard it is to make you happy? And secondly, many viewers said romantically, Lucy and John just didn't make sense because Song never showed us flashbacks to when they were happy. We see them fight a lot. We see Lucy beating herself up about how she hates herself for being so materialistic, hating herself for hating John because he's not rich, when in a perfect world he'd be the one, but we don't see why they should be together. And to make matters worse, John isn't even established in a career path in his mid-30s. Like, she doesn't need a multimillionaire Pedro Pascal type, just someone who has a decent paying job would have made more sense. Why give up on Harry, a man who by her definition is a unicorn, who checks all of her boxes and though did get leg lengthening surgery, also doesn't shy away from that conversation and owns it. A big part of the movie is that love costs money, because only when you have money can you actually begin to focus on what's really important in life, like love, happiness, and fulfillment. Only when you have financial stability can you fully dedicate yourself to another person. When the financial strains don't exist, isn't it that much easier to love? Though many of us would say yes very eagerly, Song seemingly says no. Love is hard. Put a pin in this for later. And I have to agree with Godsey here and say that what Song is really saying is that for women to marry for love, the woman needs to be financially independent and make enough money to have that privilege. And that's sad because love shouldn't be reserved for those who can't afford it. I too am puzzled by the choices made by Lucy and Song in this film and the confusing messaging, but I also don't hate that she ends up with John either, so hear me out. I think there's a reason why she asks John for help and not Harry when Sophie L calls her about her abuser showing up at her door. And it's not just because John happens to be with her at the time and Harry, I guess, went on his solo trip to Iceland, but I personally think that Harry just wouldn't understand all of her baggage or be able to relate to her or help her with this very serious problem. In my mind, he just tried to throw money at it, hoping that the problem would go away. I just can't imagine Harry sleeping outside, making sure the guy doesn't come back, and doing that all for Lucy, like roughing it for her. Harry would never be able to really relate to her sordid history about money and class struggle and understand her on that level as much as he could try, because he never had to worry about money. And so I get why they end up together. So with that said, let's look at the themes. The Materialists, like 500 Days of Summer, is a movie about love under capitalism. The Materialists more so, obviously, but 500 Days of Summer too deals with love, words of love, being something you can buy and written by someone else, mass-produced, commercialized, and impersonalized. Love made easy. And both Tom and Lucy become disillusioned with their careers that both pertain to love because the capitalistic nature of their jobs are dehumanizing and the antithesis of what love is to them. What is love to them? Well, let's take that pin out. To both sets of screenwriters, love is hard, but is worth doing when you find the right person. As much as we'd like love to be easy, they say, it's okay that it's complicated, messy, and illogical. As the writers put it in 500 Days of Summer, love is taking that risk and staying with someone, even though one day they might wake up and feel differently. And in Materialists, it's loving someone despite them being flawed or not living up to what capitalism demands of them. It's about waking up and committing yourself to someone every single day. And as much as we'd like to live in a world where we could normalize easy love or make love easy because we wouldn't want any material possession or anything more than the other person, love will never be uncomplicated, with or without capitalism. Human feelings at times are inexplicable. And though I know that's not the perfect defense for Lucy ending up with John, love doesn't make sense, so you shouldn't be upset. I don't think that's fair. I do think that it does answer for at least part of the confusion, at least for me. And you, of course, are free to disagree with me and the movie. These are just my own thoughts. Both Lucy and Summer, despite being cynical and irony poisoned about love due to their parents being divorced, still end up married at the end. And both can't explain logically how or why it happened. It just felt right, and that's life sometimes. As Summer says, she knew her husband was the one because I knew I could promise him I'd feel the same way every morning in a way that I could never be with you. And I'd like to think that the same thought process is what Lucy went through with Harry. That maybe perhaps one day she would wake up next to Harry and feel differently, but she wouldn't feel the same way with John. And I know that this is me as a viewer putting my own thoughts into the text that aren't necessarily there, so it's kind of letting Materialists off the hook, but that's my headcanon. And aside from commenting on capitalism and love, both are about internalizing messages about love. Love is grand gestures in 500 Days of Summer, and Tom idolizing the graduate. And in Materialists, it's about fetishizing luxury. It's about eating out at expensive restaurants, receiving special gifts, and living in penthouses. Under capitalism, we are all turned into commodities. What can you do for me? And when it comes to love, it's a similar situation. Why would anyone date below their station if they didn't have to? Under capitalism, true love comes second to survival, which is why there's the cave couple that are juxtaposed to modern-day New Yorkers. Back then, love was, as Song sees it, pure, unadulterated by money, but today, under late-stage capitalism, we are so far removed from that purity. And so Lucy ends up with John because the song Their Love is Pure.
The whole movie is about fighting the way that capitalism is trying to colonize our hearts and colonize love.
And this is where it gets a little muddy for me, and I have thoughts because this sort of romanticization of the poor leads to their essentialization, and the essentialization of them as a class, and what they symbolize in society rather than viewing them as fellow human beings. Poor people are purer than rich people. We should look up to the poor because even though they have it so hard, they're still better than us. They're happy with nothing, therefore we shouldn't change their station. They just end up as corrupt as we are. And though that all sounds like a compliment, I actually think it takes away their humanity. It makes the poor have to be perfect victims in the eyes of the rich and powerful until they're not, until they have to resort to stealing or theft or less wholesome ways of making ends meet. Then they deserve what they get. They deserve to be mistreated and rounded up and jailed because they're not performing poverty correctly. It's dehumanizing in a more covert way. And though Song portrays Lucy and John's love as pure because of their lack of money compared to Harry, meaning they love one another for who they are as people away from material distractions because John has no wealth, John as a character is also not a perfect victim and is a full, well-rounded character with flaws which helps her dodge this characterization pitfall. And conversely, Harry, the rich guy, is not an evil rich guy. A lot of the viewers had trouble with Lucy wanting to rekindle things with John after he outwardly looked down on her line of work and again fought with her on their anniversary. What makes him the one and not Harry, who can not only provide for her 10 times over, but is a nice guy to her and likes her for who she is? Isn't their love also unencumbered by material possessions because he loves her intangibles? Song's response is that she's upset by it. She's upset that people don't like John, and she thinks it's classist to not get why someone would want to be with John. It makes her sad to hear that people view her ending as poor boy propaganda when men deserve more than that.
It is very brutal. I find it very cruel. to talk about John as a character who loves Lucy and who is a beautiful character being played beautifully by Chris, and to talk about him as in such cruel terms as broke boy or broke man.
And to be honest, I also agree that it makes zero sense for Lucy to choose John, but I will also say that choice didn't take me out of the movie, nor is it broke boy propaganda. When I see a man like Harry, my first thought is, you will never see this man. That short form video about a girl giving advice to women who want men in finance. He is so up there on the class ladder that he will not have time for you, and you'll be vacationing alone. The same could be said for John, who has to work a lot to make ends meet, but maybe he'll be able to work less if Lucy takes this promotion. She and him might have more freedom to spend time together. So I don't blame Lucy for not getting together with Harry just because he's rich. Though maybe Harry doesn't even need to work, but it seems like he does, as he has a work life and an office and runs his family's company. Harry might be everything, but for me, I wonder how much time he'll have for Lucy or for anyone as a businessman. To be fair, I also don't think John is that great either, but I think it does say something for her to end up with a guy for love, and that song wants to say that love does still exist even in a world where we become commodities to one another. I don't think she's settled as much as she decided to take a leap of faith, even if the guy is meh. One reason why Materialists spoke to me so much is because it made me think, at least, that as a young married person, these are the good old days. We are living in the good old days. Days you'll remember on your deathbed. Meeting the one, falling in love, starting a family if you desire to. It's something that shouldn't be taken for granted, and when it does happen, when you do fall in love, you need to seize it because of how special it is. As you get older, like into your 30s, I just turned 30 this year, you start to realize how many oddballs, so to speak, there are out there. Just absolutely unhinged people. So when you do find someone who you can connect to on a deeper personal level, it's like finally someone who gets me. And it's something, again, not to be taken for granted. And though Harry and John were both able to give that to Lucy, Lucy chose to play love and life on hard mode. And that's her choice as a character, and that song's choice as a storyteller. But of course, that doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. Even though Lucy says love is easy in the beginning of the film, she discovers by the end that love is hard. Again, as 500 Days of Summer puts it, no one can guarantee you that they won't wake up and feel differently in the morning. No one can give that to you. But if you're able to find someone who's willing to try, who accepts you and understands you and your baggage, isn't that enough? As John says, I'll love you to the day I die. It's a lifetime guarantee, and I won't forget it even when things are shit. I'll make a calendar item every day reminding myself that I love you. I'll be your certainty. But of course, that's just my opinion. I know it's not a popular one, seeing how badly the movie did, so feel free to disagree with me down below. So I praised both movies quite generously in the first part. Now let's get into some critiques. The first one is that though in both movies the protagonists need to stop projecting their fantasies onto their partners, that Summer and Harry are the one, so to speak, it's a little different when it comes to women. For men to stop projecting their dreams onto women and thrusting these roles that women must fill for them, it makes sense to tell them to stop doing that, and to point out how harmful that is because of the patriarchy. For women, it's a little harder to tell them to stop projecting their insecurities onto men, especially when it comes to finances. Women marrying upwards to gain social mobility and access to money isn't something that women do because they're materialistic bitches. It's something necessary to survive and is a lot less glamorous than the media likes to portray it as. This was explored in White Lotus seasons 1 and 2, where young wives are paired with rich misogynists and stay with them because they have no other marketable skills. That's the hell world we're living in, so to have Lucy end up with John felt like a slap in the face to how women have to live in the real world, where our choices actually have consequences and aren't made simply because we want to have nice things and eat at nice restaurants. Being at the financial mercy of a man is scary, and though Song could be saying that by having Lucy not end up with Harry and being her own woman and girl boss, it just kind of fell short, especially when she tried to have her cake and eat it too by saying that women are just as materialistic as men because they want someone who's 6 foot, when that is incomparable to a man who wants a 20-year-old girlfriend. There's a huge power imbalance between men and women that is not addressed. Instead, she tries to equate the two, and that's not right. Materialist to a lot of women felt like Song was telling them to lower their standards, to be kinder to men because they have it rough too. Even 5'6" men who are handsome multimillionaires are insecure, didn't you know? Cry me a river. A lot of people couldn't suspend their disbelief for that, and honestly, I couldn't either. Does height really matter that much if you're rich? Or is it when you're rich, it doesn't matter if you undergo a risky surgery with no guaranteed payoff? Either way, I wasn't buying it. A woman looking for a financially secure man and who happens to be good looking is not the same as a man looking for a woman he can easily manipulate because she's much younger than him and at his monetary mercy. And I don't think that it was a smart move to tell women to be less picky and be kinder to men. Not in this climate. The second thing that irked me is the materialist hunter-gatherer thing. First off, I didn't know if the cave woman was looking through her boyfriend's bag when he came back because she was curious about his tools and how much stuff he had, or to see how much he was worth, or was it just to show how primitive their tools were? Or was that to show that we as humans have always been materialistic? But then in the end, with the flower ring, does it prove that we aren't as materialistic as we're made to be under capitalism? I also didn't like how they lived alone. Where's their hunter-gatherer community? Where's their society? Are they monogamous? Were we as cave people monogamous? And then the close-up of the woman's pregnant belly, like, okay, where's her childcare village? The two of them are going to be raising this baby alone? Like, show us how an anti-capitalistic society would work. Show us community. Show us people working together. It's not just two people. And lastly, women also hunted and gathered, not just men, even though the man is the one coming back from the trip and the woman is at home. It's a nitpick, but that just annoyed me. I also questioned Song's idea that love was ever pure and unadulterated. Maybe there wasn't capitalism in the caveman times, but did status matter? Were relationships made purely based on love? I don't know. What is the evidence that supports this? I think we'd like to believe as modern humans that there was a time when we were uncorrupted by our human nature, but I don't think there ever was such a time. I also think about monogamy in ancient times. Did hunter-gatherer tribes practice monogamy? Let me know down below if you know. It feels a little naive to think so, but maybe. And with both movies, they're very white, straight, and cis. When love is more than just men and women. 500 Days of Summer even goes on to say there are only two types of people in this world, men and women, but I guess they get a bit of a pass coming out in 2009. But even Materialists doesn't delve into other types of relationships, polygamy, gay, or lesbian, except as a throwaway punchline about a closeted lesbian who's asking for too much. Summer is actually bisexual in the film, but that's again a throwaway line used for comedic effect. Both films remain uncritical of this gender debate between men and women, and though touch on capitalism and patriarchy, I think one of the biggest reasons why marriages between straight people fail is because we put ourselves in these gender boxes and see each other as rivals or as being from different planets instead of just people figuring life out. Instead, you have to be a man and I have to be a woman, and we need to perform monogamy and gender to each other when in reality, we don't have to. I would have liked Materialists to explore other types of relationship dynamics other than hetero marriages and monogamy, but maybe that's just me. In the end, both 500 Days of Summer and The Materialists attempt to subvert what it means to be a movie about love and romance for their respective eras, and both do an okay job at it. The former tries to tell men to look in the mirror, but somewhat misses the mark in that many viewers took away a different message, that Tom was a victim. It took a good 6 years for people to come around to see Summer and their original vision. And for what it is, it's entertaining and takes advantage of the film medium. However, we could still have stood to know a little bit more about the titular character. When it comes to Materialists, many audience members felt there was much to be desired. Many thought it missed the mark entirely, and they're not wrong. But for me personally, I still found the movie to be incredibly touching and moving. I thought the performances were 100%, and though perhaps had a flawed ending, to me it was decent and reminded me that we are living in the good old days. As young people, we're living through moments and memories that we'll yearn for 50 years from now, and that we must savor every bit of our lives and each other while we still can. And even though the movie got mixed and negative reviews, it at least tried something new. And to get this type of varied, critical response means that it at least made us think and sparked a debate, which is the least art can do, right? So that's it for this one. Let me know what you thought about this video and about the movies down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.